have the audacity to give them closure. Shame on you. That's terrible.
How dare you accuse me of this?
Oh, so there's some...
I didn't do it!
There's some anger now, huh?
I told you from the beginning I didn't do it!
Is that how you feel against him?
No! That is not how I feel against him.
I think you're just upset that you got caught with this and...
Not even close.
No?
No.
There's a moment during Devyn Michaels' police interview that investigators never forgot. During the interview, a detective asked Devyn a simple question about her daughters and whether she loved them. Devyn said that she did. Then she added something nobody in the room had mentioned. And enough to murder, sir. The statement immediately caught the detective's attention because nobody had used the word murder. At the time, it seemed like an unusual comment. By the end of the investigation, it would seem much more significant. This is the case of Jonathan Willette. August 6, 2023 started as a normal day, and there was nothing about it that suggested it would become the final day of 46-year-old Jonathan Willette's life. Jonathan spent part of the day with Devyn Michaels and their two daughters as the family went school shopping in preparation for the upcoming school year. For the girls, it was simply an ordinary outing with their parents, while for the adults, it appeared to be a positive and uneventful day. Earlier that day, Jonathan had proposed to Devyn. He had even told the girls they would be flower girls at the wedding. Later that evening, surveillance footage captured Jonathan and Devyn stopping at a Chevron gas station together at approximately 10:05 p.m. Nothing about the footage appeared unusual, and they looked like two parents going about their evening as they normally would. After leaving the gas station, they returned to the home on Palo Duro Avenue in Henderson, where Jonathan's mother, Yoko Willette, was also staying. She saw her son and Devyn together inside the house, and nothing about their interactions stood out to her that evening. There were no visible signs of an argument, no obvious tension between them, and no reason to believe anything was wrong. Later that night, Yoko went to bed, and the house gradually became quiet. At some point after Yoko had fallen asleep, Devyn left the residence. Meanwhile, at another home across town, one of her daughters repeatedly tried to contact her. Phone records would later show that the child called her mother 3 times between 11:13 p.m. and 11:21 p.m. because she wanted her to come home. Despite those attempts, none of the calls were answered. Then, sometime around 3 a.m., Yoko woke up after hearing a loud noise from somewhere inside the home. She listened for a moment, but when everything became quiet again, she assumed it was nothing serious and eventually went back to sleep. Years later, Yoko would still remember hearing that noise. At the time, she thought little of it. She had no way of knowing that by the following morning, her life would be changed forever. The following morning, Yoko Willette became concerned when she realized she had not seen or heard from her son. She went to check on him inside the house. What she found immediately told her that something was terribly wrong. When Yoko entered the bedroom, she found Jonathan lying motionless. Within moments, she realized that her son was dead. She called emergency services, and paramedics and law enforcement officers quickly responded to the residence on Palo Duro Avenue. As investigators began examining the scene, they quickly realized that this was not a typical death investigation. There was one detail about the condition of the body that immediately changed the direction of the case. Jonathan Willette's head was missing. Investigators secured the home and began processing the scene. The discovery raised far more questions than answers, because it suggested that whoever was responsible had spent additional time inside the residence after Jonathan's death.
Is it just them two in the house?
That's what it sounds like, but
I don't know if anybody went upstairs yet.
Let's lock this down then.
The circumstances also made it clear that this was not a random act of violence. Someone had killed Jonathan inside a home where other family members were sleeping only a short distance away and had then taken extraordinary steps before leaving. As detectives worked through the scene, they began trying to determine who had last seen Jonathan alive. One name immediately stood out: Devyn Michaels. She had spent part of the day with Jonathan and their daughters, appeared with him on surveillance footage later that evening, and had been at Polodoro residence only hours before his body was discovered. Investigators needed to understand exactly what happened after she left the house. As investigators continued examining phone records, surveillance footage, and vehicle data, they began reconstructing a timeline that would place Devyn at the center of the investigation. One of the most important breakthroughs came from surveillance footage and vehicle data. A camera located near the neighborhood captured a dark-colored Nissan Armada traveling through the area during the early hours of August 7th. Investigators later determined that the vehicle was registered to Devyn Michaels. The footage showed the vehicle leaving the area at approximately 2:04 a.m. When detectives compared the footage with data recovered from the vehicle itself, they found that the timestamps matched. The vehicle's internal GPS documented the same journey. Records later showed that Jonathan's phone traveled along a route that closely mirrored the movement of the Nissan Armada. The records showed the phone left Henderson at approximately 2:04 a.m. and arrived near Devyn's northwest Las Vegas residence approximately 40 minutes later. To investigators, the timeline was becoming increasingly significant. Jonathan's phone had left the area during the same period that Devyn's vehicle was traveling away from the neighborhood. The question, however, was obvious. If Jonathan's phone had made that trip, where was Jonathan? At that stage of the investigation, detectives still did not have all the answers. What they did know was that the victim's phone appeared to have traveled across the Las Vegas Valley during the hours after his death. But how? As investigators continued examining the people closest to Jonathan, they uncovered a relationship that would become one of the most unusual aspects of the entire case. The mother of Jonathan's children had been living a double life that involved another member of the Willette family. That person was Devyn Willette, Jonathan's adult son from a previous relationship. Investigators learned that Devyn Michaels was not only the mother of Jonathan's two daughters, she had also been involved in a long-term relationship with Devyn. The relationship had begun years earlier and would become one of the most unusual aspects of the entire case. Investigators learned that the relationship began when Devyn and Jonathan were still connected to one another. Over time, that relationship became increasingly serious. Then, investigators discovered something even more surprising. In November 2021, Devyn and Devyn had quietly gotten married. The marriage had not been publicly celebrated, and very few people appeared to know about it. Yet, official records confirmed that Jonathan's former partner and the mother of his daughters had legally married his son. The discovery dramatically changed investigators' understanding of the family dynamic. What initially appeared to be a relatively typical custody dispute was suddenly much more complicated. By August 2023, Devyn was living in a home on Porcupine Rim Drive with Devyn and the 2 daughters she shared with Jonathan. At the same time, Jonathan had recently gained sole physical custody of those children. Investigators also learned that Jonathan had plans to spend more time at the residence and had been working toward building a stable family life with his daughters. This was no longer a case involving a victim and an ex-partner. It involved former partners, secret relationships, competing loyalties, custody disputes, and a family structure unlike anything investigators had expected to encounter when they first arrived at the crime scene. Even so, unusual family dynamics are not evidence of murder. Detectives still needed something far more important. They needed proof. As the investigation continued, they obtained a search warrant and turned their attention toward Devyn's home. And what they found there would move the case in an entirely different direction. As investigators continued reviewing the evidence, they obtained a search warrant and traveled to Devyn Michael's home in northwest Las Vegas. By that point, detectives had already spent days reconstructing Jonathan Willette's final movements. They knew that Devyn had been with him on the night of August 6th, and they knew that both her vehicle and Jonathan's phone appeared to have traveled away from the Palo Duro residence during the early hours of August 7th. What they didn't yet know was whether any physical evidence connected her to the crime. When investigators arrived at the home, they noticed Devyn outside near her Nissan Armada. She appeared to be moving items around the vehicle. While approaching the residence, they also noticed a cell phone lying near one of the vehicle's wheels. Rather than immediately collecting it, they left it where it was until the scene could be properly documented. Moments later, something unexpected happened. One of Jonathan and Devyn's young daughters came running out of the house, holding a cell phone. The child ran directly to her mother and held it up. To her, it was simply her father's phone. She had no way of knowing that her father had been killed, or that the device she was carrying would soon become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the investigation. The girl then said, "Daddy didn't answer." For the detective standing nearby, the moment was difficult to ignore. In the middle of a homicide investigation, they were suddenly face to face with one of Jonathan's children, completely unaware of the role she had just played in the case. Devyn took possession of the device before handing it over to investigators. If Jonathan had been killed inside the Palo Duro residence, how had his phone ended up at Devyn's home across the Las Vegas Valley? As investigators continued analyzing the device, they uncovered another detail that drew their attention. Records showed that several calls had been placed to Jonathan's phone after the estimated time of his death. The calls originated from Devyn. To detectives, the situation appeared unusual. If Jonathan's phone had already traveled to her residence, then she would have known he was not carrying it. Yet, calls were still being placed to the device. The investigation continued. Inside the residence, detectives began searching for any items connected to Jonathan. What they found was difficult to ignore. In a bedroom dresser, investigators discovered a collection of personal belongings that belonged to Jonathan. Hidden beneath clothing were his driver's license, debit cards, wallet, and the only set of keys associated to his Chevrolet truck that investigators were able to locate during the case. The items were not simply stored together. They had been wrapped inside multiple layers of plastic grocery bags. Each bag had been tied shut before another bag had been wrapped around it and tied again. The packaging immediately stood out to detectives because it appeared deliberate. Forensic testing later revealed another important detail. DNA belonging to Devyn Michaels was found on the knots used to secure the bags. As investigators continued their search, they located another document belonging to Jonathan. His social security card was found inside Devyn's purse. The discoveries continued to accumulate. At the Polidoro residence, investigators had learned that 2 Ring security cameras had been installed around the property. Those cameras could have provided valuable information about who entered or exited the home during the critical hours surrounding the murder. When detectives searched Devyn's property, they found both cameras. The cameras were located inside a red bag in the garage. Investigators also discovered that the SD cards had been removed. The footage that might have explained what happened during the night of August 6th was gone. Detectives soon learned about another missing item. The evening before Jonathan's body was discovered, Yoko's partner, Masao Yoshida, who had also been at the Polidoro home, had used a butcher knife while preparing food for the household dogs. After the homicide, the knife could not be located. Investigators were never able to recover it. By this stage of the investigation, detectives were no longer looking at isolated pieces of information. They had Jonathan's damaged phone at Devyn's residence. They had his personal belongings hidden inside her home. They had missing security cameras that had been removed from the crime scene and transported to her property. And they had multiple questions that still needed answers. The investigation was no longer centered on where the evidence was leading. The evidence was already leading them somewhere. What detectives needed now was an explanation. They would sit down with Devyn herself. By the time investigators sat down with Devyn Michaels, they had already spent days piecing together Jonathan Willette's final hours. They had revealed surveillance footage, examined phone records, searched her home, and collected physical evidence. What they needed now was an explanation for how so many of Jonathan's belongings had ended up in her possession after his death. During the interview, detectives began asking Devyn about the events of August 6th and the hours that followed.
Okay.
Shopping, got girls' school supplies, clothes, groceries. That was it. It was a very easy, pleasant day for the most part.
Okay. And then at night, John is moving in with you?
John was moving the girls' stuff to my house. It wasn't until he had actually moved everything over until I realized he was moving some of his things over.
Okay.
John had been telling me he was going to move, but that had been months of going back and forth and he hadn't actually moved anything, so I didn't put any stock into it. So when he moved some of his things over, that's when I realized he was actually moving his things. Yes, I remember talking to John about it. Yes, I remember talking to other people about it. But until that moment, it really wasn't something that was going to take place.
Okay.
Because at one point, a few times, he said he wasn't going to move. And it had happened more than one time, so I just took it as it was.
Okay.
At first, many of her answers appeared straightforward. She spoke about her relationship with Jonathan, discussed their daughters, and answered questions about their time together on the day he died.
He had full custody?
No, we both had temporary joint custody. He filed to be in sole custody, and he never showed up, so his motion was denied.
I thought CPS revoked or took your parental rights away for a bit.
They did.
Okay.
As the interview continued, however, investigators began confronting her with specific pieces of evidence. One of the first issues involved Jonathan's personal belongings. Detectives asked whether she had any of his property inside her home. Devyn initially denied having any of Jonathan's belongings. That answer changed after detectives informed her that they had already located his wallet, identification cards, and truck keys inside her residence. At that point, Devyn explained. She claimed that Jonathan had given her those items for safekeeping and that she had intended to place them inside a secure location. But that answer was not good enough when the man in question had turned up dead.
Why were they in your underwear drawer wrapped up in a million bags?
Because when he gave them to me, I didn't realize what I was taking, and I just put them away and said, keep them safe. And
That's not
what I did.
normal.
You just said, when he gave them to me, you're like, I don't think I was supposed to take these.
No, I said in hindsight. I literally said in hindsight, I don't think I was supposed to take those. The Social Security card he gave me, the other cards he gave me, you could see that on the surveillance camera. He hands me the card, but those ones, I don't think I was supposed to take them out of the house. I think I was just supposed to put them up, and then in the morning, he was supposed to go and get them. That's what I said. In hindsight, I don't think I was supposed to take
But
them.
why did you wrap them up in bags and put them, hide them in your dresser drawer?
I wrapped them up. I don't think I was supposed to bring those with me.
You're not answering my question. Why were they wrapped up in plastic bags and put in your underwear
I had
drawer?
wrapped them up right then and there in front of him.
Why didn't you just put them on your dresser?
One tied, another tied, another tied. It wasn't like one tied. It was repeatedly wrapped over and over. This was a thoughtful process. Put them in there, tie it up, put it in another bag, tie it up.
Right, like I
8
said,
times.
I didn't realize what I had at the time, and he's saying keep them safe, so I'm wrapping everything up and I'm hiding it.
For what reason?
I don't know. He didn't say anything. He gave me this. He says keep it safe. It was the Social Security card.
The Social Security card was in your black backpack.
Right. I didn't even get a chance to put that away.
So you take that, put that in this not safe spot. The only thing that he asked you to keep safe, you keep in your backpack. But the stuff that you were not supposed to take, you wrapped up 8 times, 8 separate times in a bag, in bags, and then hid that?
No, do you not understand?
No, I don't.
When I got home, it was late. I showered, I went to bed.
Among other things, they still needed to understand how Jonathan could have driven his truck if she had already taken possession of the keys. The conversation then shifted to how the items had been stored. Detectives had found the belongings wrapped inside multiple layers of plastic bags, with each layer tied separately. Before investigators even finished discussing the packaging, Devyn began describing how the bags had been wrapped. She explained the process layer by layer, describing how one bag had been tied and then another placed inside. The explanation immediately drew the detectives' attention because they hadn't asked her to describe the packaging in such detail. To investigators, it appeared that she was volunteering information about an item they were still in the process of discussing. As the interview continued, detectives turned their attention to what happened inside the Polodoro residence on the night Jonathan died. It was during this portion of the interview that Devyn made one of the most significant statements of the entire investigation. She told investigators that she had been with Jonathan in his bedroom. She had been giving him a back massage while he was lying face down.
Okay. So early you described something to our partner that he wanted some sort of sexual encounter with you?
That wasn't going to happen. I hit him. He was not dead.
Okay.
That's when the local came down. I spoke with her. Like I said, afterwards I left.
Okay. Have you recently had a sexual, intimate relationship with him?
Recently,
Well, in the past, month. Obviously, he's moving back in. You two are speaking. Have
he's
you?
asked me for sexual favors, yes, but no, we have not had intercourse, no.
Okay.
She claimed that an interaction between them escalated and that she reacted by striking him with an object she described as long and dark.
When I hit him, he was breathing. I didn't,
How do you know he was breathing?
because you could tell when a person was breathing.
Okay.
The chest goes up and down.
Okay.
You said it was dark though.
You could still know when someone's breathing.
In the dark.
It's not pitch dark, but yeah, it's not.
So you can't see an area on his head because it's so dark, but you can see his chest moving? You
No,
can't see what you grab off the shelf because it's so dark when you walk over, but now you can see him breathing?
Yeah, you could see some person breathing. Your eyes can adjust.
Oh, well, then your eyes should have adjusted before all of this then too.
I just don't know the exact spot. You
Okay.
asked me and I said I'm not positive.
So right hand or left hand did you use?
Right, sir. You
Right.
asked me that.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to clarify so I don't say anything that's wrong.
No, and I already said I feel horrible about it, but I didn't murder John.
For investigators, the statement was critical. Until that moment, Devyn had simply been connected to the case through phone records, vehicle data, or items found in her home. She had now placed herself inside the room with Jonathan during the period when investigators believed he was killed. Yet, one of the most memorable moments of the interview actually occurred much earlier. At one point, a detective asked Devyn whether she loved her daughters. The question had nothing to do with the physical evidence. It had nothing to do with Jonathan's injuries. It had nothing to do with murder. Devyn responded that she loved her daughters deeply. Then she added something else. 5 words.
Kind of keep them happy to a point. Yep, can keep them away from me, which he has done before.
You love your girls, don't you?
Very much so.
With all your heart?
Yes, I'm not to murder, sir.
I didn't say that. I'm just asking you that you love them with all your heart. That has nothing to do with murder.
Yes, sir, I do.
The detective immediately pointed out that nobody had mentioned murder. Devyn acknowledged that fact and continued speaking. The interview moved forward, but investigators remembered that statement. Because by then, they had already spent days gathering evidence, reconstructing timelines, and searching for answers. And now, sitting across from them, was a woman who had voluntarily introduced the idea of murder before anyone else in the room had done so. By the time the interview concluded, detectives believed they had enough evidence to take the next step in the case. That next step would come only days later. In the days following the interviews, investigators continued reviewing the evidence they had gathered throughout the case. By that point, detectives had reconstructed Jonathan Willette's final known movements, tracked the travel of his cell phone, searched Devyn Michaels' residence, and documented the statements she had made during questioning. They also arranged for Devyn to undergo a polygraph examination. While polygraph results are generally not admissible as evidence in court, investigators often use them as an investigative tool. The examination produced reactions that investigators considered significant when questions related to Jonathan's death were asked. The results did not determine whether a crime had occurred, nor did they establish guilt. However, they became one more factor that investigators considered as they evaluated the growing body of evidence. As detectives reviewed everything they'd collected, they believed a clear picture had emerged. They had evidence showing that Jonathan's phone traveled away from the crime scene after his death. They had recovered his personal belongings from Devyn's residence. They had located security cameras that had been removed from the Palo Duro home. And they had statements from Devyn herself placing her in the room with Jonathan during the critical period that investigators were examining. Taken individually, each piece of evidence raised questions. Taken together, detectives believed they had probable cause to make an arrest. 8 days after Jonathan's body was discovered, Devyn Michaels was taken into custody and booked on a charge of open murder. The arrest marked the end of phase 1 of the case and the beginning of another. For detectives, the focus had been on determining what happened during the night of August 6th and identifying the person they believed was responsible. Now the case would move into the court system, where prosecutors would be required to prove their theory beyond a reasonable doubt. The investigation that began with a shocking discovery inside a Henderson home was now headed toward a criminal trial. At least, that's what everyone expected. Over the next year, however, the case would take a turn that nobody saw coming. In September 2024, Devyn agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. The plea agreement meant she would avoid a trial and face a reduced sentence. But in July 2025, during the sentencing hearing, Devyn withdrew her plea.
I know right now no one in the family is going to believe me. I know right now no one in the family feels that I am innocent at any point. and I understand that, but I can actually prove my innocence. I actually can, and I'm not gonna stop fighting to prove my innocence. I have more than enough, and Jonathan deserves to have the actual person who's guilty behind bars. I was helping Jonathan. I can show that I was trying to help him, and this I know is hurting the family, and I can see it in your faces, and I know your hearts are angry, and they should be, and I'm angry for you. And this is not fair to you. This has been dragging out for almost 2 years. It's not fair to you. And it's not fair to his children. Any of them.
In November 2025, more than 2 years after Jonathan's death, the case finally went to trial in Clark County District Court. The prosecution argued that the evidence pointed to Devyn. The timeline, the phone movement, Jonathan's belongings at her home, the missing cameras, and her own statements. The defense claimed that investigators had focused too narrowly on Devyn and raised questions about Devyn Willette. They also highlighted a message from Devyn's phone that read, "Headed there now." The prosecution countered that the message did not place Devyn at the crime scene and that there was no physical evidence, phone data, surveillance footage, or witness testimony connecting him to the homicide. After deliberating for approximately 2 hours, the jury found Devyn Michaels guilty of first-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. On January 8, 2026, she was sentenced to 20 years to life for first-degree murder. In addition, the court imposed a consecutive sentence enhancement of 8 to 20 years for the use of a deadly weapon. But even after the conviction, not every question in this case received an answer. Investigators were able to reconstruct much of what happened during the night of August 6th and the early morning hours of August 7th. The Ring camera footage that might have provided additional insight into the events of that night was gone as well. Despite extensive investigative efforts, authorities were never able to locate Jonathan Willette's head. Investigators also never recovered the power saw they believed was used after Jonathan's death. Without these critical pieces of evidence, certain forensic questions could never be answered with complete certainty.